All right. I think we just hit live and people are streaming into the room. Fantastic. All right. 25. All right. There it goes. It's starting to count up. Everyone's logging in right now. 1:00, coming back from lunch. Hope everyone is well out there in the world. If you can hear me and you can see me and all that fun stuff, make sure you jump in there and do the normal and tell me what you're calling in from. Let me know where you're calling in from. Lets me know where people are from all around the world. And it's always fun to see the furthest listeners of the world here. So Madison, which we already know, is here in Austin. So thank you, Madison. All right, here we go. Maria from Portugal. I love that. There we go. Now we're talking. We've got upstate New York, Berlin, international. We're going international here today. I like it. Utah. We got a little bit of everyone. All right, another Germany in the house. Oh wait. Oh no, you were saying Berlin, Germany. Okay, yeah. I assumed Berlin, Germany when I saw that. I'm always going to assume the furthest distance, not the closest. Connecticut, Cleveland. All right, look at that, guys. Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited for today. We got a lot to go over. Got a special guest that's going to present and teach us some really cool stuff. The story goes like this, and I know he's going to repeat a version of this story, but I'll give you guys a story while we're letting the rooms load in. But, I saw Chris, and, I interact on social media pretty often, especially on X. I'm using X now, not Twitter anymore. I'm trying to be better about it for Elon's sake there, but X. And, I post these kind of takes that I think about a lot of things backed on data based on my experience. But then this guy, Chris Orzi, that I'm sure many of you guys might have seen on social media, would always often kind of take a different approach to my take and kind of challenge me back. And I love that. That's what I want. That's how we grow together. That's how we become better humans. And he showed me proof and things that he's doing with an alternative. So I think that there's a lot to be said around my stuff is going to be, and you'll see it in this presentation today, but my stuff is going to be really about if you're not doing the next thing, the next edge, the next step, things that maybe Chris is going to share you around, you're going to learn really quickly that if you start adapting and changing, you can start working the channels differently than what you might be doing today. And today, like, for example, I like short and sweet messages because I think that overly long messages don't create a better positive output of revenue or conversion, and it's not worth the credits. And I talk about that, but Chris is going to show you how you can do that, for example. And those are one of the fun things that we'll have. So let's go ahead and bring Chris up. Chris, are you there? Can you, there we go. There he is right there. So Chris is here, guys. Everyone say wave, say hi to Chris. Very excited, Chris, for today. I know we've kind of gone through your presentation here, but I want to kind of bring you up here and I'll kind of introduce you first. I probably should do that as probably the thing. So Chris is an e-commerce copywriter. Orzi, yes, there you go, Ben. And an email marketing expert. He's an author of this book called The Moat. It's how to build a durable and profitable e-commerce brand that can last forever. Those are some strong words, Chris. Lasting forever. I love it. Very excited to have you here, the man, the myth, the legend, Chris. I would love to have you kick this thing off, introduce yourself, jump into this deck. I know you got all that stuff to do, and I'm going to interrupt you along the way. I'm just here to moderate and make sure that I'm asking questions. So for everyone listening on the other end, let's make sure that you guys are typing in questions along the way. I will see them, pick them up. I'll interrupt Chris along his flow just to challenge him and give him curveballs and throw questions at him so we can continue to learn together. So that's what we're going to do for the next hour. This is being recorded for those who might, and that means if you do, for some crazy reason, have to leave here early, well, we've got you on a recording so you can watch the final part of it. So, Chris, my man, go ahead and share your screen and let's take this thing away.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Let me just click in quick. Okay. All right. So, I actually don't know how we say this title. Email, handshake, SMS. The multi-channel approach for driving.
You've got to use the emoji of things. Punctuations, asterisk, punctuation.
Yeah. Gotta fit it in those characters, right? For SMS. But yeah, we're gonna talk about SMS and how it relates to email. And just real quick about me, just so if you've never heard of me, you're probably like, who the hell is this guy? Been featured in a lot of prominent media publications because I paid a lot of money to a PR agency. Worked pretty well. I worked with a lot of brands. The number one brand that most people know my work from is Carnivore Snacks. But I've worked with a lot of decent sized e-commerce brands. I've also have some experience with, other types of clients like I did, at my agency, we've done projects for The Hustle. We've done projects for Motley Fool. So, definitely a lot of e-commerce brands, but we also kind of go a little bit all over the spectrum and just help people with, solving high-level copy problems and high-level launch problems and email marketing problems. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we actually helped with their direct-to-consumer side. So, yeah, I've been doing this for 11 years and have learned a lot, worked with a lot of different clients, a lot of different verticals, and just want to share some cool stuff with you guys. You also might have heard of my book, The Moat. In case you follow me on social, it was one of President JFK's favorite reads back in the day. Featured in the movie American Psycho. Also made Oprah Winfrey's book club and Reese Witherspoon's book club. And believe it or not, Warren Buffett actually credits most of his success due to The Moat, little known fact. So yeah, check it out. It's on Amazon. I'm going to get sued for that one. No, but like Jimmy was kind of alluding to before, Jimmy's got like the best content, I think, on Twitter or X, excuse me. And he was saying something about, SMS being too short for cute copy. Right. And I actually do agree with him here. I think a lot of brands, sometimes you see brands try to step outside the box and be a little bit too cute and like it kind of backfires on them. So I think Jimmy's advice for like 90 to 95% of brands is actually spot on. But when I saw that, I was like, for those 5% of brands who have a fleshed out voice or who kind of want to inject more voice and emotion, like people talk about having a brand, like what does that mean? Right? Like the number one thing that I've noticed over the years in this industry is that there's a lot of common problems that people see. And like, if all you ever do is send out 15% off, sale this weekend, like you train your buyers to only buy when there's sales. I mean, a good example of this is J. Crew. Like it's a clothing brand that I love, but I will not buy anything for full price ever at J. Crew because they train me to only buy. And like, I know that $98 shirt that I want is going to end up being $32 if I just wait about 4 to 6 weeks. Right. And that's not the kind of brand that you want to be.
Isn't it crazy how people can train the consumer in their worst ways sometimes?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, it's funny, like my wife, like when she shops online, she's like, oh yeah, I just added this thing to cart and just waited to see what happened. And 25% off in the abandoned cart. And I'm like, man, I mean, like, it might make sense for some businesses. Like obviously, there's always some where they just have their unit economics worked out. But I think as a blanket strategy, it's just not the way to go. And I think by having a well-defined voice and kind of like a mission behind what you do, it allows you to kind of think outside the box, right? And it allows you to sell at full margin, allows you to retain your customers longer. And most importantly, it trains people in the opposite direction. It trains people to actively always look forward to what you're sending instead of just being like, oh yeah, I got to unsubscribe from that email because all they ever do is, drop a million promotions for stuff that I don't need or don't want. And like, I've just noticed that over time. So what I want to do today is kind of show a different approach. And the reason why, like, there is some proof behind this. So Mark Ritz is my good friend and co-founder of Carnivore Snacks, and we were slacking one day, and he was working with this other company, this other SMS company, and he was saying that the people at this company reported back to him. They said, dude, your last click attribution is among the best we've ever seen ever across all of our accounts. And they were like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, well, we do things differently. And that's kind of like, not to tease you, but that's kind of what I'm going to be unpacking today. Like, our strategy is wildly different than most things that you'll see out in the SMS landscape. And it's just so crazy that it actually works. Like, that's the interesting thing about this. It kind of flies in the face of all the typical, marketing best practices you see.
And Chris, the best practices, right? Like, if I'm looking at most, and we go back to the 90 to 95% brands on our side as a provider, and things that we see often is that SMS is very much incremental and not really a leader in a lot of the ways the revenue works. So like, if I'm doing 40% of revenue, 30% of that revenue might be email driven last click, where you see SMS is finishing that last 10%. And that's really because of the nature of SMS, right? It's a now channel. It's in a moment channel. There's a transactional state to it. And it's also an intimate channel. So I think that everybody kind of knowing that that's kind of the baseline of the way that we think about it. And then now we see this is where this gets really unique and special, guys.
Yeah. And like my whole goal is to to appeal to like to help you push into that top 5%, right? Like, because you can just follow best practices and get to the 80th, 85th, 90th percentile. But it's like, how do you get in the top 99%, right? Like, or excuse me, like, how do you get in the top upper 1% of the best performing brands out there? And like, that's where the greatest gains come from, right? Like, if you can get over that hump and push to that next level, it's like, it just unlocks so much extra brand equity, margin, retention revenue, lifetime value of the customer. And my North Star for all of the stuff that I do with my clients really comes down to this quote from Howard Gossage, he was like a 1950s, 1960s ad man. And he was a bit of a renegade himself. Like, he would, if you've ever read any of his books, he was kind of like the opposite of David Ogilvy, like, and all these other like, big time ad guys. Like, he, instead of trying to like carpet bomb the landscape with ads all over the place and be on every single TV station and every single magazine, he would be like, no, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna run one ad in the New Yorker. We're gonna run it one time. We're gonna outsell everyone. And like, that's what he would do. He'd do these amazing like ultra viral campaigns that would get him tons of word of mouth and tons of like earned media impressions. Like, people would write about his ads and the campaigns and things. It was crazy. He like engineered viral marketing decades before the internet. And so if you ever do like a deep dive study on him, like, his concepts were really eye-opening for me. Excuse me. And he has this quote. He said, people don't read advertising. They read what interests them. And sometimes that's advertising, right? So when we live in this world where everyone is oversubscribed, whether it's SMS, whether it's email, whether it's social media, and they're just getting blitzed with 10,000 marketing messages a day. It's like, well, how do you stand out? How do you be different? And how do you gain the mind share of that customer, right? Because that's where all the biggest gains come from. So the way that I kind of like started my SMS journey and started to kind of figure this stuff out, it was kind of funny. Like, I was working with this company called NeuroGym. Now, they're not an e-commerce brand. They're in like the personal development space. John Assaraf is the owner of that company. He was in the movie The Secret. And we were doing this thing back in like 2017 before SMS was like even like a cool thing. Like, back then, like, people didn't even really think you could really make money with that. Like, SMS wasn't even really talked about. It wasn't a big thing at all. So we were very early to it. And I pulled up this page from the Wayback Machine. So excuse the janky formatting. I couldn't get all the images below and everything. But we were doing this thing called Daily Prime. And what it was this motivational SMS message that got sent out every morning at 9 a.m. in your time zone. And it was just like a little dopamine hit, like a little, just a little quick inspirational thing to start the day. And this thing worked so well. And all we were doing was just sending these like interesting, fun little SMS messages with no pitch. There wasn't even a link in them, but people absolutely loved them. They shared them with their friends. They were like raving about them. Like, they would reply back to emails and be like, oh, I love the text messages. And we were just doing like really basic stuff. Like, you have the strength inside you to beat any challenge that comes your way. When things get tough, dig down deep inside and you'll find a hidden well of power. So like, it was just something that was like, just lifted people up every day. Right.
No, Chris, I remember this. I'm very familiar with John Assaraf, and I was in like the kind of the internet marketing world back then with affiliate marketing and so forth in my early days. And I remember when he did this, I remember actually watching, I think it was in San Diego and La Jolla at one place, but I remember him actually talking about this on stage somewhere, actually talking about how he congregated this big text list, but didn't know how to make money off of it. And then he realized it was more of a loyalty channel of like how you keep your people connected to you ultimately.
Yeah, it's so funny. That was me. I'm the guy. I wrote.
Yeah, you're the guy, and it's all like full circle. That's why I'm telling you this is like I'm talking like a decade ago plus, like maybe 12 years ago, but maybe this was maybe 12 years, 10 years ago. I don't know how long ago it was. Maybe it was a little bit less, but it feels like forever ago ultimately.
Yeah, and it works, like you said, it just worked so well. And like what we started doing after a while, what we started figuring out was that we could actually, I think we were doing this about once a week. We would do like 6 days of like the inspirational text, and then we would send one of these that had a call to action. So like if you go to any of these blog posts, they'll be, not huge long form blog posts, but there might be 500 to 1,000 words of more content. And then oftentimes there would be links and things to go into these automated funnels for automated webinars. And we would actually put a decent amount of people through those. And so these are people who are on our list who might not have been responding to those other promotions through email or through ads and things like that. But then they were tumbling down the rabbit hole and going through these automated funnels through SMS. So it was like a really cool experience for me because I kind of cut my teeth here. And I for a while after that, I didn't do too much SMS because again, like it wasn't a super popular thing, but I always kind of kept this in the back pocket. And I was like, one day I know I'm probably going to use this again. And it worked really well. And the thing, like my contrarian take that I learned from that experience was like your text messages should entertain, educate, and inspire people. And as long as you're kind of living, in those, like you're staying in those lanes, you're going to do all right with SMS. Like it's pretty hard to screw up if you're doing those three things.
I love this, Chris, because my framework that I tell people on the email side is excite, educate, edify, right? So it's get them excited, get them to read, give them the logical reason, and inspire them to click. But like you're taking a different approach to that formula, and I love it because it makes sense. So you educate, entertain, and then inspire. I like how you flip those two on that side too.
I didn't even know that. We should have coordinated on that one.
Yeah. I call them my 3 E's is my framework that I use to look at any good email and say, are you exciting, educated, and are you edifying, right? Are you asking for the click? Are you giving them excitement? Are you giving them all the logical parts that the human brain needs to make the decision? So, it's the kind of a similar framework that I've used for a decade plus that I talk about all the time. But this is a very good take on SMS because I honestly don't have a good SMS take because I don't have enough SMS because like you, I didn't get to work in SMS when I was a brand because it didn't really exist back then.
Yeah. And like, I forgot what I was going to say. I mean, the thing is like, I remember what I want to say. To piggyback off your point, what I've learned too, working the space for a long enough time is like seeing hundreds and hundreds and thousands of different brands is like anything you sell, someone is selling almost the exact same product, if not the exact same product, but they're selling it cheaper or they're making it more convenient, like through retail or through other channels, right? So like, how do you continue to win in an environment like that? Like your brand messaging has to be elevated. It has to be different because that's what people are buying. They're buying the aspirational vision that you put out, right? They're buying the products are just a vehicle for them to get to that vision of the life that they want to live and the person that they want to become. Like in the modern world, that's how people identify. That's how people kind of signal who they are, but it's by the products that they choose to buy. It's like if you buy a Honda, that has a very different outward, projection of status than if you buy, a Range Rover, right? Like those are kind of like what they both drive you from A to B, right? They both have, air conditioning and power windows and, mostly the same features. Obviously there's some different features, but you're not really buying it for the features necessarily. You're buying it because it's expressing who you want to be in the world, right? So your brand has to kind of do the same thing. And like when you look at what a lot of brands do in SMS, like here's just 5 that I pulled from, 5 examples from my own phone. Like there's a lot of different styles, right? Like some people are using imagery, like this is Fawn Bone Broth, James Purse, they just are straight up like, hey, we got some clothes. Here's a picture. And like, they make a lot of money. So obviously like there's a lot of different approaches that could work. Shinesty is a brand. Actually, they were one of my other inspirations too. They do an exceptional job. Some of theirs are extremely funny. Like this one is a howling wolf, a bolt of lightning, your butt. This badass trio is back for limited time only. Now available women's, right? So it's definitely more like, sales focused, but they're funny as hell. Arachnophobia is the fear of spiders. Eserocophobia is the fear of underwear. If you have neither, this pair is not for you, right? So like there's definitely some voice, and that's why I think that brand, they sell kind of like products that you definitely don't need, but you want to buy them because they're fun and you like the brand, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do this. But it's like what you're seeing here is like this is just 5 of the SMS list that I'm on. Like eventually we're going to reach a point where there's the SMS like inbox or whatever you want to call it, the app that people receive messages in is going to become crowded. It's like, well, then how are you going to maintain the mind share that you built already?
Yeah, Chris, when you think about that SMS inbox right now, and you think about the infancy of where we are with a lot of that, and you go overseas, for example, and you go to like India or you go to even the UK, a lot of the people overseas don't use SMS the same way that the US people use it. It's actually pretty interesting. They've already channelized into WhatsApp or Kayako Talk or Telegram or any of these other places. And it's pretty interesting that I think we're kind of taking that same direction. We're probably behind with him if you think about it. And a lot of this stuff that you're kind of talking about, I don't know about you, but I obviously, because of my own customer base, I end up being opted in to a lot. And then I don't want to unopted. And now I almost feel like I need a burner phone lately just to keep my SMS for my promotional text in one inbox. Dude, I'm right. I wake up in the morning and I go to sleep and I feel like there's just messages all day, and they're not really. I'm just getting pitched about a bunch of times. And most of the things I won't buy because unfortunately I'm not a 45-year-old woman, for example, and I'm just not going to buy that sundress. So, you know what I mean? But anyways, carry on. I just wanted to kind of talk about that because I think it is good mindset thinking about where this channel is headed.
Oh yeah. And like, there's this great Ogilvy quote that I love to kind of piggyback on what you're saying. Like, you know, Ogilvy said there isn't any significant difference between the various brands of whiskey or cigarettes or beer. They're all about the same. And so are the cake mixes and the detergents and the margarines. The manufacturer who dedicates his advertising to building the most sharply defined personality for his brand will get the largest share of the market at the highest profit. And I think we see that time and time again in you know, if my wrestling coach used to say, like, the cream always rises to the top, right? And I think we see that in a lot of industries, that on a long enough timeline, like, the brands who do this tend to do well over the long term for the most part, right? So how do you actually do this? Well, I want to tell you a story about Carnivore Snacks, who I referenced before, because that's where I've had the bulk of my, you know, SMS experience. And Mark has been really cool in letting me just kind of run wild and just try a bunch of different things and just to see what works well. Now, Carnivore Snacks, if you guys haven't heard, like, they've kind of been through an interesting journey. Like, you know, I helped them. I've been working with them since they were pre-revenue. I think we started working together in around late 2019. We launched 2020. And we started with Kickstarter. They started with no list, no nothing. We were able to, you know, scrounge together a pre-launch list, run some ads with a tiny amount of ad spend. We ended up doing about 200K in the first 30 days. And at the end of last year, they finished at like 12 or 12.1 top line. This year, they kind of hit a bit of a snag because the Ohio Department of Agriculture went and shut them down in what, you know, we believe to be as a really egregious case of government overreach. Without going into too much detail, there's a lot of laws about, like, you know, having university-backed studies, and all of them are about beef jerky, but Carnivore Snacks, not beef jerky. It's actually much better. Like, the texture is way better. The taste is way better, where a lot of jerky snacks are kind of like leathery and rubbery and tough to chew. These ones are like meat potato chips or meat pastries that kind of melt in your mouth. That's because they use a slightly different process. So anyway, they had this whole issue with the ODA. The ODA shut them down, and the business wasn't, we were seriously about to be out of business. Like, this was probably end of February this happened, I believe, when Mark sent me the text. So we had to kind of scramble and figure out what to do, because they had this huge tax bill coming. They were not able to sell anything unless they had the ODA in there supervising them. So they had to essentially shut everything down, like, you know, doing about $1 million a month all the way down to zero. And we're like, okay, we got to come up with a Hail Mary to kind of save this product. And the cool thing is, we were able to save the company. I'll ruin the ending. We were able to save the company because what we did was we brought in, you know, we were cooperating with the ODA, using their new processes, and we were able to do a pre-order for the next batch, and we were able to raise $700,000 with 3 emails and 3 SMS messages. And the way that we probably could have done more, but if we sold any more logistically, it would have been an absolute nightmare. So Mark was like, hey man, we got to kind of pull back on the throttle here. But I was like, give me $1 million. I want to hit $1 million. Right. So we probably could have done it if we'd sent maybe, you know, 1 or 2 more emails. And people hear that and they're like, wow, that's a pretty amazing result to be able to do that with, you know, such a small amount of, you know, marketing assets. That's zero ad spend. Also, like, we didn't put any ads behind that. That was just from the database. And the reason why is because of this relationship that we've cultivated with the list over the years. And it starts with the style of communication that we use, where we're not necessarily focused on products. We're focused on outcomes. We're focused on lifestyle. We're focused on the aspiration for who these people want to be. And because we have nurtured that dynamic with the customer database, when we got into trouble, they came out big for us. I mean, we, you know, posted one of the emails on Twitter. It got about, you know, over 300,000 impressions, almost 400,000 impressions, tons of new customers. Like, when people heard the story about what happened, it was absolutely wild. And I really credit a lot of that to the relationship that we built with the customer base because of how we do our communication. Here's a picture. They're delicious. You guys should try them. an example of this, right? Like when I say like, the style of communication, like what does that mean, right? So I'm just going to quickly like read through this email. Like this is a sample email that like the typical kind of stuff that we'll send, and you'll see why it's so different, right? And why people continue to tune in and actively look forward to the stuff that we send. So I wrote this one, said kale chips equals very sus, not bussin'. So I had to use a little Zoomer language here. So I said, for most of human history, kale was used as a pretty decoration on salad bars next to bowls of actual food. This mustard leaf is full of phytotoxins and is actually the third most contaminated vegetable, according to Time magazine. There's a special look of pain behind the eyes you notice when you see someone eat a kale salad. Despite this, some midwits decide to be edgy and start eating this plant item. You've seen this look before. It's the look of despair. It's the look of someone who's forced themselves to ingest nature's grossest piece of plant matter so they could virtue signal. Amazing. As the Zoomers say, kale is mad sus. On the other hand, carnivore snacks are bussin', for real, no cap. That means they're very good. People need to, Regina George, stop trying to make kale chips happen. They're not going to happen. Give in to your primal desires. Stick your face into a bag of carnivore snacks. Let the meaty goodness envelop your senses. Marvel at our meats. Get down on all fours. Growl at an innocent passerby. Howl at the moon. Exhibit massive chimp energy at all times. Become ungovernable. Enjoy yourself. Tell the kale industry to F off and opt for carnivore snacks instead. Meat is the future. So, like, when you think about an email like this kind of breaks all the rules of what people think when they see, like, oh, we're a DTC brand. We got to do email. We got to like put an image of the product and have these flashing, graphics and these GIFs, and we got to have a sale and we got to run another sale. And it's like there's no incentive. There's barely a call to action. Get some. Here's a few products, right? Like, but this style of communication, it makes people love our marketing. It makes people actively look forward to it. So we don't have a retention problem. Like people are always like, you're only going to retain 30% of your customers. I was like, yeah, but you don't have to. Like, that might be the industry standard, but that doesn't have to be your standard, right? You could let the industry deal with their problems if they want to keep doing things the same way. You don't have to have the same problem as everyone else.
Well, a lot of the times, a lot of people, and I always tell this story, I said, how did a lot of people learn email marketing? They learned it because John, their VP, or Bob or Sue, whatever their VP was, looks at one of their people, and I'm just going to Sue, and say, hey, Sue, you now are in marketing and you do email marketing. Well, what do I do? And go, well, send a newsletter every week. And then what does Sue do? Sue jumps online and goes to the biggest brands that he or she knows and looks at those big brands and go, okay, headline, some products, a bunch of product imagery, do this. Let's copy that. And then that's carried for the last decade, 20 years of that mantra. And nobody formally learns a lot of email. I'm not saying everybody, but most people don't formally learn how to really understand email. And what you've talked about here, and when I say it, is it's copy. It's not even just email. It's the psychology of direct response copy, basically, that you've put into here. And it's kind of where I cut my teeth from, and I can recognize it really fast. And it's like, if you narrate a good story, people will read it, people will be attracted to it, people want to come back for it, and they'll look for it ultimately because they are hooked within the narrative, not about just the product, but now they're bought into the vision or the person or the product, whatever that might be, right? And that's kind of what I see here when I look at this.
Yeah, and all marketing is tribal, right? So if you're building a tribe, what are you building them around? Obviously there's a clear common enemy here, and there's a clear rallying cries, right? And obviously the voice is kind of funny, and not everyone has to take the same voice, obviously, but for this brand, that's what we've chosen to go with, and that's what I've kind of helped them formulate over time. And again, that's really just a credit to Mark and Sylvia for, they just let the dog off the leash and just let me run wild, right? There's some stuff, and I'm like, wow, you're gonna let me run that? Really? Okay, let's see how it does. And some of those things end up doing really well. This was one we did around Christmas time, and everyone's like, here's your gifting guide, right? And here, hey, don't forget, your mom or your cousin or your coworker, right? It's just okay, here's a coupon, right? Whatever. We go in the complete opposite direction. So I was like, how do we make this interesting about Christmas, and how do we make it again? The whole goal of this is when people read these emails, they read it, they get a little dopamine hit, and they're like, I can't wait to see what they do next, right? Yep. And we're always trying to do that. So this one, we have reason to believe that Santa, the subject line is Santa on steroids, right? So again, no mention of a product. We're not introducing the new holiday gift bundle. That's what people do, right? We're no. We're going to talk about Santa possibly being on steroids, right? So you got to read it. What the hell is this even about? What's going on here? So we said we have reason to believe that Santa might no longer be natty. Sure, he spent most of his adult life gorging on gorging himself on sugar cookies. Sure, he has a somewhat sedentary lifestyle with his rear parked in the velvety throne for 90% of the year. Sure, he's justified his lifestyle decisions by saying he needs some extra insulation to deal with the harsh climate of the North Pole. But lately, Santa's been making some changes. We're not really sure what his new health regimen is, but while we can neither confirm nor deny these allegations, we can confirm one thing. Santa recently swapped out the sugar cookies for some carnivore snacks, and then we used, obviously, an AI generated image of Santa on steroids, which I think was perfect. Turns out when you stop eating tons of processed sugar and gluten, you get pretty fucking yoked. Word on the street is Santa's been slamming down bags of carnivore snacks in preparation for this year's Christmas, the biggest one on record. He's been putting time in the gym. He's been hitting his PRs and crushing the weights. He's counting his macros and checking them twice. And you better believe he knows if your diet has been naughty or nice. If you want to get jacked like carnivore claws, then you should consider signing up for a subscription program. Anything but average. The average person gains 8 pounds of pure body fat between Thanksgiving and Christmas. You don't want to be this person. You're not average. Don't eat like an average person. Grab a subscription, save yourself some cash. You'll never be without your snacks. We need them, especially during this crucial holiday season when temptations are everywhere. And then it's just kind of, details about the subscribe and save program.
I love that this isn't about gifting, but it's about themselves. And you're kind of repositioning the thing that's in the back of everyone's head through the entire holiday season, which is I'm eating way too much. I feel terrible, but I'm still doing it. And you've kind of talked about that pain point. That's the pain point that you're really knocking into, which is cool.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you do that in like a non-confrontational way? It's like, well, you just deflect it, right?
Yeah. And
you turn it onto a different idea, like turning it onto Santa himself, right? And these emails, they do great. They really do well. And because they're just so fun and they're interesting and sometimes they're funny, right? So it's like, well, how do you transfer that to SMS? And I really view SMS and really even like the emails that we write themselves through this lens of, if you guys have read the book Persuasion by Cialdini, it's a pretty good book. He's a very smart marketing mind. He also wrote the book Influence, which is another popular one. And in that book, I mean, there's this quote, which I could kind of boil down to: whatever you show them first is going to influence the way they feel about the next thing that they see, right? And he says this in a more convoluted academic way, but it's this idea that like you're going to show them something, it's going to change their mental state and make them feel a certain way. And that change that you cause in them is going to change what happens next in the relationship, right? I view SMS as this way to kind of write copy that builds your brand and let the link build curiosity and get the sale, right? Because again, you have 160 characters max for a short message, right? And if you want to include a short link, it might actually only be about 145 or 150, depending on the length of the link. And like, yes, you can go longer, but to Jimmy's point, like we don't actually go, with these super long text messages or like the multi-text message. We usually just try to keep it to where it fits into that 160 character limit. So it actually is really short and kind of clever at the same time. Right. And what I learned, it's like, well, how do you do that? And what I've kind of arrived at over the years is like, as I've been writing so many of these text messages, and we started doing one text a week and we were making a bunch of sales. And then we said, okay, maybe we could bump it to 2 text messages a week. Like, let's see if the sales fall off. We bumped it to 2 a week. Sales didn't fall off. We said, screw it. Let's go to 3. Went to 3. Sales didn't fall off. They're still doing really well. Like it's still, getting a good enough return where it made sense to keep sending them because we were, posting up good numbers every time. And for me, as the person writing these, I was like, okay, well, I need to think of a repeatable framework that I could use over and over again. And so I went into my toolbox and found, the Blair Warren 1-sentence persuasion course. Maybe some of you have read that book. It's a really short book. And in fact, it's kind of summed up on this one slide. The 1-sentence persuasion course is: people will do anything for those who encourage their dreams, justify their failures, allay their fears, confirm their suspicions, and help them throw rocks at their enemies. So if you are doing all of these things with your marketing messages, whether it's within the realm of SMS or whether it's in a Facebook ad or whether it's in an email or an organic social post or, in a script you give to an influencer, like as long as you're doing these things and living in this zone, you're going to be okay. Right. And if you do all 5 of these things consistently, it's going to work really well.
Yeah. What a great simple line that explains that book, but also just kind of shares about everything. I mean, basically they buy into you, they'll love you, and they'll follow you, right? That's how you create tribe members. It's also how you create a cult, I suppose, but like, it's the same thing, right? It's, if you think about a cult, it's like if you did everything to the 100% max and have had a bunch of people believe exactly what you did, that's what a cult is, right? Like it's the same idea, but not saying to go build a cult, but I think what I see here is like, you realize that leader, if you can lead by attracting, ultimately by becoming, what's the best word I'm thinking about? Similarities, being able to kind of create a similarity and like create a common presence between each other. Like you all want to follow that leader. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And it's like, there's so many products, there's so many options. Right? So why are they going to choose you over all of the other options? Like why? You need to give people that reason why. And you can choose what that reason is. Like that's, people don't think they have a choice. You absolutely have a choice. Like that's what a brand is. Like the brand is what you've communicated to people and the vision that you've put into their mind about who you are and how you help people, right? So like I want to show some actual examples of how we do this with SMS. So we'll just kind of take it one at a time, like encouraging their dreams. So some of these are kind of funny. Some of these I think are funny, but you might not think are funny, but we're just going to go through them anyway. So like this was one, self-care is all the rage nowadays. And sure, mindfulness is cool, but have you ever tried meatfulness? You'll never be the same. I promise you that. Say yes to meat. So like there really isn't even there's a link, but it's not like, hey, go buy our brisket snack and it's 10% off until tomorrow. Like there's no real like hard and fast typical SMS call to action. This other one, this is, I think, I got to ask Mark, I think this is one of the best performing ones. At least this is the one that generated the most buzz within our internal community. Have you ever gotten a kiss from your true love while standing under the mistletoe? Maybe this will be your lucky year.
The mistletoe is killing me.
I think that's the best thing I've ever written. I should probably retire after that because I don't think I'll ever top that.
Dude, you got to recycle it every year, man. You know how good market, you just recycle it.
Yeah.
Mistletoe, that's the key word here.
Mistletoe. I sometimes I amaze myself. Not everything I write is that good, I wish, but that was a good one. And then even these ones, like you've been called the chicken champion, the ribeye rebel, the strip steak superstar, but we just think of you as our favorite customer. So like, again, it's not like this huge grand thing. It's just like encourage their dreams, like tell them they're cool, let them feel good, right? Want to impress your friends at the tailgate this weekend? Ditch the grill and show up with this. Watch their jaws drop. So this one's definitely a little bit more of like a curiosity focus. Like they have to click the link to like, ooh, what's this about, right? Like I want that benefit. That's a cool, like it's not some grand life-changing dream, but it's just a cool little like, ooh, I want that benefit, right? And then I like to try to use a lot of memes and things. So like you guys are probably like, oh, you like this band, name 3 of their songs. So I was like, oh, you like carnivore snacks, name 3 of their cuts. You impressing the cool kids at the party, right? So we're just always making them feel good, giving them those dopamine hits and, quote unquote, encouraging their dreams, on a small scale. The next way is confirming their suspicions. So, and again, I have to apologize in advance to any vegans, vegans and vegetarians, because if you are a vegan or vegetarian, you're not going to like me very much by the end of this presentation. It's nothing personal. It's just marketing, right? But with carnivore snacks, like just if we could zoom out for a second, like their brand, like if you look at nutrition as a spectrum, like on one end is vegans and the complete opposite end is like the hardcore carnivore dieters. Like vegans just eat plants, carnivores just eat meat. They don't even eat potatoes. They don't eat anything. They literally just eat meat. Like that's it, right? And that's not the entirety of the carnivore snacks audience. There's also hikers, there's also hunters, there's outdoors people, there's paleo people, right? So it's not necessarily like we're just selling to those people, but it definitely is a bit of like a positioning play because like if you're a hardcore carnivore, like there's this existential battle and you see it online, social media, like the vegans versus the carnivores, and they're always fighting and talking shit about each other. And I'm like, cool, well, I know who our people are and I know what gets them riled up. So like, so this one is vegans will literally invent sawdust based slot patties and flavor them like beef instead of just eating real meat. Sick and twisted. Say yes to real meat. And then this one, mainstream science is finally starting to realize what we've known all along. Fat is good and delicious and awesome. Marbling for the win. Shop snacks today. So again, like some of these will work in a bit of a stronger call to action, but like look at how much we're packing into 160 character SMS. Like it's not just like coupon language, right? Like all these things are rallying cries.
And I see your framework kind of showing up each and every time as you're exciting them, you're educating them, you're giving them a reason to kind of follow, right? Like I get it. Like you're inspiring them. Like this to me is like, you've got a common enemy that you're going after. And you're like, here's how I'm educating you. It's the common enemy. We're entertaining you with funny words. And then you're inspiring them to go do something ultimately with that message.
Yeah. It's like persuasion at its finest, right? Because this is influencing how they think, how they feel, and it's going to influence the next action they take once they land on that page, right? Because they're doing whatever they're doing. They're at work, they're commuting, they're on the bus, they're, on the toilet, scrolling through their phone, boom, all of a sudden text comes in and they weren't thinking about you at all. And now they're thinking about you. And then how are you making them feel? And are you inspiring action as a result of that interaction, right? And yeah, there definitely, like you said, there definitely is some overlap between these concepts. And I think the best SMSs will overlap some of these. Like this one definitely has some throw rocks to common enemies. Like globalists want you to eat crickets and live in a pod. We want you to eat meat and be happy. This is an easy choice. Vote for meat, right? And then even in here, NYC instituted Meatless Mondays and Vegan Fridays in its public schools. They're coming for the kids. Fight back with some snacks. So again, we talk about like confirming suspicions, right? Like these are things that my market sees in the news. They see this on X. They see this on Facebook. I know the stories they're reading. I see that stuff. I live in the market. I'm out in the jungle with them, right? I see it. I understand the cultural zeitgeist of this individual market and how they think and how they feel threatened, right? And what those forces are that are threatening them and their way of life. So we're matching here, right? Like we're matching their thoughts with the messaging that we're putting out. Even this one, the WEF, which is again another common enemy for people who like to eat meat, flew hundreds of private jets, LOL, to meet up and get their talking points to lecture us on climate change, fight back, and eat regenerative. The interesting thing about carnivore snacks is all of their meat is regeneratively raised, so it comes from regenerative farms. And if you're not familiar with regenerative agriculture, it is good for the environment. It's not carbon neutral. It's better than carbon neutral. I guess it's carbon negative. Is that the term? Where it sequesters more carbon into the ground than the animals let out. And it restores topsoil. It replenishes soil density. It replenishes nutrient density in the animals. So you get better meat. You get animals that are raised the right way outside of the factory farming system, which is actually kind of a freaking nightmare. And it restores the land. Because again, if you have no topsoil, you can't grow food. If you can't grow food, you're screwed, right? And like, so I will get off my soapbox for a second, but it's actually the best thing ever for the environment. And people are just like, cow farts. I'm like, no, that's factory farming. That's bad. Like regenerative agriculture is the best possible way to raise an animal. And it's the best thing for the environment. So
yeah, no, I love this, by the way. When you go to the copy there, the climate change where you spelled it with the kind of like the up and down caps and all that stuff, you're letting an emotion out through even words there, just by the way that you're personalizing. You're obviously making fun of it, right? You could have put quotes around it. You could have done all the different things to play there. But I love how you played on the words there, like lecture us on climate change. Like that's how I'm going to read it immediately because that's how it is written, right?
Yeah, this actually comes. Maybe you've seen that SpongeBob meme, like the mocking SpongeBob one, when him like flapping his wings with the weird face, and so like not everyone gets it, right? Like that's kind of an Easter egg that like the people who are kind of, I guess, maybe terminally online or like in the meme space a lot, or like the millennial generation, maybe even like some Zoomer generation people, they see that and they instantly recognize. So it's almost like a dog whistle. Those people, and they're like, oh, they're doing the meme. They're doing the meme, right?
It got me.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So like, and it's hard because like some people are like, well, what if everyone doesn't get it? I'm like, it's okay if everyone doesn't get it. It's not necessarily for everyone. It's for like that white hot core, right? Like the core of the market, the biggest vendors. Like Drew Sanaki talks about whales versus minnows. We're talking to the whales right here, the people who get it, who get us, right? Who get what we are as a brand, right? Justifying their failures. So again, it's like, how do we kind of be like, hey, it's not your fault, right? It's not your fault why you have not been able to achieve the results you want in your life, because we view this as being a very outcome-focused brand. It's not a like, I don't think the best brands focus on products. I think the best brands focus on outcomes. And I'll say this a million times, like the products are a vehicle to get to the outcome, right? The products are the vehicle. Your products will change over time. They will get better. You will sunset old products. You will launch new products, but all of these products are a vehicle to get to an outcome. And that's why the brand exists in the first place, right? So this one, the modern world doesn't want you to be healthy. That's why there's processed food, seed oils, and slop at every turn. Don't worry, we got your back.
Yeah.
And then this one, carnivore snacks. And this one is kind of also encouraging their dreams a little bit too, right? Glowing skin, big muscles, chiseled physique, mental clarity, high energy, low inflammation, no bloating, improved blood sugar, healthy heart, healthy gut. Yep, you must be a carnivore. This one is one of our best performers ever. This is a Mother's Day one. That the forlorn look on her face is because you got her flowers instead of carnivore snacks. Break the cycle of disappointment. Get meat for Mother's Day. This one was really well received. People were absolutely dying, and it sold a shit ton of.
It's relatable. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
must be your target audience. It's very relatable, all the things that you say.
Yeah, I think so, right? This one, football players don't become the fastest, most powerful men on earth by eating plant-based patties. Take one wild guess what they eat. Here's a hint. So there's curiosity. If you look at the date, September 2nd, so this is like right at the beginning of the NFL and college football season, where it's kind of like top of mind again, like going back to like what's within like the cultural zeitgeist of our market. Like, what are they thinking about? What are they watching? What's on their mind? Like, what is that? Who's the old school admin? Robert Collier letter book, which I think that book fucking sucked. I hate that book, but there was like one line that was good out of it, and it was like enter the conversation in your prospect's mind. I hate that book. I think they should light every copy of on earth on fire. That book sucks, but that one line is all you need to know. Enter the conversation in their mind, right? And this is also kind of harkening back to, there was this documentary about these vegan football players. No, they're so awesome. And then like after the documentary ended, they all had their worst season ever and then switched back to meat, which is kind of funny. This one too, like again, justifying their failures. The amount of glyphosate present in most snacks for children is nauseating. It's our goal to get meat into every child's lunchbox across America. Fight back. So it's a rallying cry. It's confirming their suspicions. It's justifying the failures for why they haven't been able to get the result. It's kind of adding some emotional twist to it. Performs really well. I know I'm talking fast. It's the Jersey in me. So
that's good, man. People like the fast talking. As someone who speaks fast in the market too, most people tell me I'm all right, as long as you're clear.
Okay. This one, allay their fears, right? So like, what are they scared about? Like, a pound of meat a day keeps the doctor away. That's what I always say. Now I'm rhyming today. Well, if I may, I'll invite you to click away. This is so stupid and so cheesy, but I was like, screw it. Let's just run it and see what happens. This one sold well. Here's another meat pun. What is the secret to happiness? Nobody knows. That's the wrong question, though. Life is all about discovering the secret to meatness. Find it here. Every time I do one of these where like, I don't know what this literary device is called when you kind of do like work in a word into another word, but these always seem to do well. They always kind of make people chuckle a little
puns,
bit.
I guess, like puns.
I guess it's a pun. Yeah. I mean, I always try to do that as much as I can. This one, food security is key for society. Remember when the economy shut down, we learned how fragile the supply chain is. Support American-raised meat. And that's a big thing, too. Like all the meat from carnivore snacks is 100% American-raised, 100% American supply chain. It's not like some of these brands, they import meat from New Zealand. Everything's greenwashed. It's BS. The packaging is, they're just lying to you, right? So like, you're getting the best stuff when you buy from carnivore snacks. We always want to reiterate that USP over and over.
Yeah, I see that in this example. Eating chemicals, pesticides, antibiotics, and other industry yuckies really sucks. That's why we only use regenerative raised. Yeah, I mean, I see you almost feel the passion out of it, right? You're educating, you're exciting them, you're getting them to, identify as part of the, the agreement, right? Like when I read these things, sometimes I chuckle, laugh, and I nod my head, but it honestly, that's why you're seeing that. I get it. It's very clear.
Yeah, and like we're going for the jugular. Like we're not playing it safe. You know what I mean? Like we will attack. We will go, because the thing is, like, we know this is a win-win-win. Like it's good for the animals, it's good for the environment, and it's good for the people. And obviously it's good for us because if we sell meat, then we can continue to grow our mission and replenish more topsoil, right? Like we can kind of chip away at the stranglehold that the factory farming industry has on agriculture, right? So like when we look at this, it's like a sacred, holy mission, right? It's not just marketing. It's like the mission is in everything that we do, right? And so like that's when I write, I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to go hard with this stuff. Like, I'm not going to take it easy. And people kind of respond to that. It's not vanilla. You know what I mean? It's not like milquetoast marketing. It's exciting, right? And like, that's what we're trying to do here. And this one, obviously, like this was kind of common before, like throw rocks, common enemies. So again, we're going back to attack our favorite group of people, the vegans. Happy Veganuary, everyone. Laugh my ass off. Just kidding. Make sure you eat 2 steaks tonight so you can cancel out all these nut jobs efforts. So like whenever we do this stuff, it just lights it up. Like people love it. Because again, it's the common enemy stuff is so powerful. And like in your market, you like even if you have the most boring product in the world, there's probably an enemy in the market. You can find it. Right? Or you could build up an enemy, right? You could like Eugene Schwartz says like, building a bigger boogeyman essentially, or that's not the exact quote, but like he talks about like, really like building up the problem, right? In your customer's eyes. And then this one was, I think we sent this the previous year. Apparently it's Veganuary. People just like eat plants, vegetables, and cardboard. I guess, I don't know. LOL. Hug a vegan if you see one. This one we love. I freaking love dunking on Beyond Beef because they like to get a little they like to get a little fresh on X every now and again, and people swarm in, put them in their place. Ribeyes are red, Beyond Beef is poo. We know you're hungry for carnivore snacks, and we love you too. Now it's time to buy some meat. So again, more of a direct call to action, but like, look how much we're packing into 160 characters.
No, it's actually incredible, and I'm sure the audience would agree as you guys are reading this. Like, you think about a typical one. Look, I'm not gonna pick on anyone in particular, but I'm just gonna grab a coupon, an email, an SMS out of my inbox right here, right? It's like, meet our new blah, blah, blah collection. Now on sale, 40% off. Use the coupon by Friday. Like, or you could have something that's enticing and that's relatable and that something wants to read, right? Like, less than 24 hours away. Like, I mean, these are all important and they work, but there's a way to kind of drive a better experience. And I can clearly see that in the way you guys are thinking about it pretty often.
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for like the very direct, very like just the fax ma'am style email. And like, don't get me wrong, like we'll use those, like we'll do that, and sometimes we'll put some fun spin on them, and obviously different brands have different voices and things like that. But I just think that it's easy to tune that stuff out. And like, I know, like for me, when I'm going through my inbox, I look at my own behavior. I'm like, I don't like Polo Ralph Lauren, right? Like, yep. I've unsubscribed from their emails, except they send out this monthly newsletter, which is all about like different like style, not like style tips, but like stories behind pieces. And like, that one's really interesting. So I read that one, right? But like the other ones, I'm like, cool, another golf polo. Like, okay, I don't need to buy this. I don't need this email in my inbox. And like, that's the worst thing that could ever happen for your organization on the retention front, is for people to be like, I know what this email is. I don't need to read this. I'm just going to delete it or unsubscribe or whatever. Like, that's the opposite of what you want. Like, you want people to get excited when they see your stuff, right?
Yeah.
You want that dopamine hit. You want to keep them hooked so that you don't have to be like, oh, we have a 15% return order rate. How do we get to 20? It's like, how do you get to 50, right? Like, how do you really blow it open? Like that, like, we're not trying to make $1 into $1.10 here. We're trying to build a tribe that's going to take care of your business long-term, right? For years and years and years. Now, like, you guys can probably recreate this fairly simply in a Google sheet, but this is like a quick way to start thinking about this. Like, think about like 5 ways that you can encourage your customers' dreams. What are 5 suspicions they have that you can kind of confirm? What are 5 of their failures? What are 5 of their fears? And who are 5 of their common enemies? Like, you just start actually I like doing this in pen and paper. I feel like you get a better, like, just thinking session when you do a pen and paper, but like, print this out or take a screenshot or recreate your own version, or just get a pen and paper and just start jotting some of these ideas down. Because as you do this, it's not only going to help your SMS, it's going to help all of your marketing. It's going to help the Facebook ads that you create. It's going to help the Twitter ads that you do. It's going to help everything that you do. Like, when you start thinking through this filter, and obviously it's going to make your SMS game a lot better too.
Hey, so hold on. Let's go back to that real quick, Chris, because I think we got a couple questions and I want to talk about it a little bit, but I've got 2 unique ones that I think are both really good. So let's talk first about this first question I got. They're curious about how you'd approach it for a luxury brand. So like, obviously we're talking about meat right now and a consumable. So you've got that fun brand, but I actually see as that a framework. And I think this is something that people sometimes hard to connect what you see on paper versus what a framework ultimately looks like and how you can change it to them. So let's pretend we're a luxury brand, high AOV price point, right? Let's just pretend, Chris, real quick, and let's mimic this. All right. How are we encouraging their dreams? Well, why are they buying it? To show off to their friends so they can be the belle of the ball, like how they can show off their value, right? Why do people buy premium goods? Because they want other people to perceive their value, right? And their position in life. So I'm guessing that's how you encourage their dreams. If you said confirm their suspicions, what would be some of the things that you would think about a high value brand that you can drive that conversation piece on?
There's this there's one ad in particular that's come to mind. I forget, it's a salon. It's an older ad, maybe from like the 70s or 80s. I want to say it's called like Hort Salon or something like that. But it said like it says something like, make your ex-husband jealous that he left you or something, right? And it was an ad for a hair salon. And like, again, that's a little bit more in your face, a little more edgy. It might not be the same kind of voice, but like, if you start looking at old space ads, they're doing all of these things, right? And they're doing it with just a headline or maybe a headline and a subheadline, right? And again, like, not that you have to be that edgy or that in your face or that direct, but I think the way to start is by starting to look at old school space ads from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, and possibly even early 2000s. But if you start looking at 3 or 4 decades ago at the space ads, you will find tons of fodder to use. Like, look at luxury brand examples, right? Like, there's the Patek Philippe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not that wealthy yet.
Really. Yeah, you're right. You're good. You're good. Good enough.
Might be mispronouncing, but there's they have one headline that says, "You never truly own a Patek Philippe. You just, hang on to it for the next generation." Or I'm butchering that a little, but like, you guys have probably seen that ad before, and it's a picture of like this dad and his son is probably like 7 or 8 years old, like sitting at his desk, like looking up at him, and like that headline, we see that, like that's what I mean, like that's an SMS right there, right? Like that's style, and that's, you don't get more luxury than that brand, right? Like their cheapest watch is like what, $40,000, right? So it's you don't have to be as conversational even. Right? Like some of these, it looks like a friend like dashed off a text message. Like, you can go that style, or you can lean in and say, well, what are some of the other short form examples that I've seen in my industry from years past that encompass all of these emotions? And I think that, like, it's hard for me to just give a blanket prescription without seeing like a specific brand and generating actual specific ideas. But that's always where I look for inspiration. Like, where do I find quick little quips, right? Like within that Patek Philippe ad, there's so much in there, right? Encouraging their dreams, definitely. Like that does it to the max, and it communicates a strong voice, and it's a strong statement and an idea, and it's something that's interesting. And it's not really like, it's about buying the product, but it's not like, hey, we only have 5 of these left, like go here and buy now. Like, it's very different because, again, it leans on persuasion, because it changes how you think about the product and how you think about the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that. And then the second question I think was even better, was like, Tony asks, what's an average ratio between a brand builders, these fun ones, and the straight up to the point informational update direct sale communication? When I think about it on my side, at least, and I'm sure Chris, you've got a take on this, but I think that always the moment ones, like the sale is closing, the sale is launched, like you left something in your cart, like those conversational, I call them more like transactional SMS to help you close it. So they're still marketing, but they feel a little bit more transactional because of behavior or an action or a sale has happened. I think those are always going to be and have their own place in SMS. But, most of it is really, I would say, less about brand building, but it's the tone that the brand is taking. You are brand building even when your cart's closing, right? Like, hey, meat lovers, 24 hours left till the biggest sale of our history is over, right? Like, if I've sent that, you're still emotionally capturing time and energy and everything, but using a brand to continue to speak through it. So that's my take on it. I don't know what you think, Chris, around that.
Yeah, I agree. I would say where you could definitely go more straightforward with behavioral flows, right? Like your win backs, your welcomes, your abandoned carts, the VIP sequences, cross sell, like those kind of ones that are more like life cycle triggered style automations. Like those. Sure. You could also inject some brand voice. I think it's a good idea. Like, if it's an abandoned cart, you're going to send 3 SMSs. Like, they don't always have to be like 10% coupon, like, or whatever.
Sure.
I think in general, like this strategy tends to work pretty well. Like, I like to have one of these a week. That's definitely like this brand building focus. And then you look at your promo calendar and say, okay, like if it's Black Friday, like, yeah, okay, send a straightforward one. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like, be clear, don't be clever. Like, you can do ones that are a little more straightforward because of the timing and the situation. But I just look at the promo calendar and I say, well, we want to have a constant drumbeat, a constant drip of these things going out on a consistent basis. And then we can make decisions about, okay, if we're going to go to 2 a week, maybe we keep one that's more brand focused and then one that's direct if we need to move specific piece of inventory, if it's a perishable or consumable, right? Or if you have a sale or a big promo, or if it's Mother's Day or Father's Day or graduation or Memorial Day weekend or whatever it is, right? Like, but what I like to look at is like, you always have this constant drumbeat of brand building stuff, and then you can kind of pepper in those little pieces of more direct sales, the direct sales approach.
Got it. That's great. All right, we're good. We can continue on.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, like it's a good segue into coordinating email and SMS. With most things in life, I'm this guy right here on the low end of the IQ bell curve, right? Like, I like to think I'm this guy, but I'm definitely this guy. There's always like the midwit bell curve meme, right? It's like, it explains like so much about business and life. And like, I always be like, am I catching myself being too like complex with the shit that I'm trying to do? And like, how do I just make it simpler? Right. So I think in general, like I said, like if you just have this constant drumbeat of these texts going out, like this is like investing into an index fund, right? It's like you're gonna send the text message and like you're not gonna be a millionaire tomorrow, right? Like it doesn't work that way. But just like if you invest in an index fund, like it's not gonna 10x tomorrow. But if you continue to build this brand equity over time, it's going to pay off with better retention and better engagement and better, sales metrics and everything else, right? And you're going to be making money from these things all the time. But like long term, where you start to see the real benefits because of how you're cultivating that relationship with these people. So I think that you should have your life cycle set up, all of them, right? And you should have them to complement your email efforts and have them integrate also with direct mail, which I'm a big believer in. But beyond that, like, this is an opportunity for you to kind of experiment with this messaging, right? So you don't have to be like, oh, should I send this? Should I not? Like, just send it. You know what I mean? Like, just try stuff out because you might find certain messaging pieces or certain timing or certain rhythm of these text messages actually produces a really good result for you. So I think a lot of it is just like knowing that I'm going to try to just continuously build this channel and build the relationship that I have with people on this channel. And not everything that I try is going to work out, but more of the stuff that I try is probably going to work out. Then, I'm probably gonna have more wins than failures. And, like with carnivore snacks, like we literally took this approach where it's like, let's send 1 week. Fuck it. Okay, let's send 2. Hey, that worked pretty well. Let's send the third one.
Yeah, no, I'm so in agreement with you on this. And I tell people this all the time. People are so worried about brand perception, how people think about it. But I know, this, Chris, that humans are like goldfish. And tomorrow, they're probably going to forget what your little, best message from your brand was. Unless you were Apple or someone with a predominant existence in the world, like they just don't care that much. And yes, you can offend people. Yes, you can do different things. But the reality is, if that was you and that was you going out into the market and you're offending. So, Chris, I sign on to Carnivore Snacks and I'm a vegan. Dude, I'm going to be offended, right? But that wasn't your audience and I wasn't going to be your buyer anyways. And I think that's something that you think about. And then, as you talk about how you combine it into email and SMS together, one of the things that I think about often is what you're doing there. It doesn't mean that you can't continue the story, the narrative. It almost feels like it's a conversation piece of different things that you guys have. It's like, hey, if my topic this week is about, gift being for myself and improving myself through having more meat instead of having the junk food, my messages on my email site should be concurrent in that they should be talking about other products and things that they have, they can go out and do this. So, there's a lot of this stuff. It kind of, you have to treat it like different channels because there are different people that are listening to it differently. But to your point that you've consistently messaged throughout this entire presentation is to have the same brand voice between the two. Even if you're going to email, you shouldn't sound like a corporate drone on your email and sound like a fun person on your SMS. No one's going to believe your brand is authentic. You've got to be real about yourself and actually combine those two strategies together.
Yeah, 100%. And like you mentioned something about like people worried about like their brand perception. But like, what's the brand perception of a brand that you forgot existed? You know what I mean? Like,
what's the brand perception of a brand who thinks that you shouldn't send an email today because you might hurt your brand? The reality is, no one's going to remember tomorrow that you sent an email today.
Yeah, and like the biggest brands in the world send the most. The biggest brands, like if you're on Ralph Lauren's email list, like you're gonna get 2 or 3 emails a day. Yeah. I mean, you might get 6 emails in a day. Like, and there's different reasons and rationales for that. Like, obviously, like we're all not multi-billion-dollar brands, but like Alex Greenfield wrote a good post about this. She was saying some people treat it like a distribution channel where it's like we know we have this asset, this audience of X amount of people, so we need to hit it this many times to reach this many impressions. I'm like, yeah, it's a different game. Like we're not all at that level where we're $8 billion a year or whatever they're at, right? So like, but again, like even them, I think they could benefit from doing some things different. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily always the right approach. And I'm not saying I'm smarter. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying like it'd be interesting to try, right? Like it'd be interesting to experiment.
What I will tell you sitting on this side of the seat, one of the most interesting things that we continue to see is that brand voice can defy all marketing strategy. And I mean this in a weird way. So I'm going to give you an example. One of our customers is easy.com, which is Kanye West, right? He's one of our customers. And if you saw his emails or saw his SMS, Chris, you'd be like, how could this work?
Yeah.
But dude, if you saw the revenue on the other side of it, it works. When you see a 15% click-through rate on a 1.5 million list, it works. You know what I mean? Like, that brand is outweighing everything at that point. And people are so engulfed with the brand that they don't care almost what the language is. It's just a narrative to continue to keep them encouraged with it, And so I see this, and you're right. Like, there's always so many things we can do. But until you got that brand at that size, you can't go out of the narrative sometimes, and you've got to be careful to come out of it, and you can follow what you need to follow. But it also is important to start carving your own path, because eventually you will have a micro brand, and you'll have a real brand, and then hopefully you'll have a global brand, right? That's what we want to see for everybody on this call. Like, that's the goal.
Yeah, I'm like, I view this as like, this is like in the David and Goliath story, like this is your sling, right? Like this is how you're going to slay the giants in your industry. Because if you can build this, even when you're small, if you could start building this from the outset and continue on that voice as you grow and grow and grow, like that again, that white hot core of that tribe is going to continue to grow and continue to take care of you long term. So that way you can get to the point where you are big enough, and over the years you built up enough brand equity where you can do whatever the hell you want and it's still going to work. And so like, it just goes back to that point that like, what are your advantages? Like for someone like Kanye, like everyone knows who he is, right? So like,
that's it. That's the advantage.
But why does it? Yeah, but why does everyone know who he is? Because for 20 plus years, he's been, putting out music. He's been, doing media appearances. He's been doing everything. He's been building products. So like, he's built this up just through other channels, right? So like, it gives him a little more flexibility to like, okay, if the emails aren't like, these long form story based ones, but again, like if he did, those would probably work really, really well too. Like that's the thing, like it might even work better than what he's doing, right? So, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, right? Like there's, and again, like some people might be watching this, but like, that's cool, but I don't know if it'll work for me. And, I like to say in general, like just try to think outside the box, right? Like I'm not saying you have to stop what you're doing right now and do a complete 180 turn, but I just like to show people different ways and show them how to think differently. And like, in terms of like basic SMS strategy, like I'm always going to default to what Jimmy Kim says for, I'd say like 90-95%, because the dude's just like next level. Like you are, in terms of the way that you think through like following up with clickers and like just, the segmentation aspect of it. So as a general rule of thumb, like when in doubt, like ask yourself, what would Jimmy do? Some stuff for me, like I like to think of SMS as like a microblog. Like I view it a lot like Twitter. Like if you're good at tweeting and doing like really like original Twitter where it's 140 characters, right? Like the 280 kind of, it's hard to write short. Like that's the thing. It's really hard to write short. Like it's almost easier to write long because you can just say what you need to say. But when you need to trim characters and trim words and say, okay, I have this 4-word phrase. How do I put, what's one word that I could use to represent these 4 words? Like it is a different skill set. But when you saw how much emotion and different concepts and ideas we were able to pack into those 160 character messages before. And like, so if you find someone who's good at Twitter or X, they might be a really good SMS marketer, or maybe that's you. For mass broadcasts, I think that there's a sweet spot, and I think that you could push it. Like and I tell people this with email all the time. I'm like, how many emails are you comfortable sending a week? And they'll be like 3. I say, okay, then send 4. Like, just push yourself a little. Like I email my list daily, and I've been emailing my list daily since 2017. And I have people who've been buying from me since 2017. Like I don't have a retention problem. You know what I mean?
I beat the drum on that all the time, Chris. The number one problem with most brands and their marketing strategy is they don't send enough messages. I don't care who you are, and I don't care what your brand is. The reality is there's not enough mind share in the world that it matters anymore. That's a 2010 adage that you're worried about flooding someone's inbox when they're getting 20 emails a day. Today, when you get 250 emails a day, no one cares. And they don't remember when they didn't get an email from you. There's no brand equity to not sending email or SMS.
That's a good one. We should pull that one out and make a little infographic on that quote.
Yeah, right? we're gonna. It's the truth, man. I mean, I've been to Ben Settle is a perfect example that talks about this in the world. I've believed and subscribed this since the beginning of when I joined the internet and did internet in 2008. And people have this thing: you'll burn your list, you'll do this. No, you don't burn your list. You're weeding out those subscribers who weren't going to buy from you anyways. They are unsubscribing because you can't sell to them again or even the first time. And the whole point is to get rid of those people so you can funnel yourself down and get those people that matter the most, that are ready to buy, intent-driven, and when they're ready, they're going to engage.
Yeah, and like you look at like other channels, like you look at like influencers. Like if you have influencers on Instagram that you follow or TikTok or whatever, like you don't get pissed off when you see a new video. You're like, oh, what's this? Like,
yeah.
But people think it's different with email. But again, because they're doing this old school, like here's an image, here's a coupon code, here's your deadline countdown timer, right? Like, and so like, yeah, people will unsubscribe from that. But if you're using copy and you're using storytelling, you're writing emails, like kind of how I showed you here, or these kind of messages, like the North Star for you is like, be a text they enjoy getting, or be an email that they enjoy getting, right? Because if they enjoy reading it and it's interesting and it's dynamic and it's new, and it goes back to that Gossage quote of like, people read what's interesting. Sometimes that's an ad, right?
That's
like
it.
read ads, they read what's interesting. So if your emails are interesting, they're going to continue to tune in. I mean, how many e-commerce brands now, like e-commerce brands, they go out and they hire influencers. Why do they hire influencers? Because influencers are producing content, right? So like, you can be your own influencer to a certain regard. Like a lot of brands that I work with, they're kind of founder led. And they might not be that for their entire life cycle, but that's how they start getting initial velocity, because it's the voice of the founder. And it's this magnetic personality that we build around that person. And people are like on their side, right? And that's what I always do. Like when I write emails, I write plain text emails. Like sometimes we'll have design like you saw with Carnivore Snacks. No Limit Email is the agency that works with Carnivore Snacks to do the design. They do an exceptional job. But I'm going in and doing the copy. I'm doing these long form pieces to keep people on the hook, always, keep their attention. I want to move through this last piece. 3 rows of Archer's approach for segmented mailings and promos. So like if you ever watch like these old, medieval battles, like these movies, like they always would have these like 3 rows of archers. It's like the first row like lets loose their arrows and they fall back, and the second row has the arrow ready and they shoot off and they fall back, and the third row of archers, they let loose their arrows. And like, that's what we're doing between email, SMS, and direct mail, like your retention marketing channels, right? Like email is that first line of archers, right? So like in terms of getting good results out of SMS, like send your emails out, and then you could follow up to all the non-responders with SMS. And then obviously if it's an automation or if it's a big promo, you could follow up with the direct mail stuff too. But I love this approach because the customer database, you want to reach them anywhere you can. Like the most valuable thing is the most valuable asset you have is that customer database in your business, right? Real quick, if you want to work with me, I have an agency. We do this stuff all the time. We're very focused on copy. It's pretty simple. It's $49.95 a month. You can put in unlimited requests. We do one project at a time, pause, cancel anytime. We do emails, we do SMS. We do all the stuff. So if you want to punch up for your copy, hit me up.
No, put that back up for a second. I mean, I hope everyone appreciates and understands where Chris comes from, and what he's offering here is not writing your email strategy per se, but actually helping you tone your brand voice through copy. And I tell this, another thing that I talk a lot about is like a lot of marketing is really copy. This is the reason why direct response marketing continues to work years and years. I mean, it's probably one of the oldest formats of marketing, but it's because words sell ultimately, not pretty pictures, not images, but words. And right. And those words are what's going to help you sell, especially when you don't have a brand to back that up. So I think this is pretty cool. And I just wanted to keep this up here for just a second longer before we go on to the next slide, just to make sure everyone sees it. Please, if you have, I typed in the wrong thing. It's orz.co. Sorry. If anybody has it, please check him out. Talk to Chris. You can find him on Twitter as well. And you can jump to the next slide here.
Cool. Yeah. So let's do some Q&A.
Yeah. Awesome, Chris. Dude, this was fantastic. What a great experience. Just kind of getting a lens into something different, a different framework and a mentality. And obviously it's very proven with Carnivore Snacks, but not only them, but all the other brands that you work with, that you've seen the outcome of a lot of the things that you're doing. And I hope everyone can see and learn from that. There's a different perspective to how you can approach these things when you're thinking about the market, and how you can think about your brand voice. And that is a unique differentiator. I bet you, Chris, if we compared you Carnivore Snacks to, and I don't know who the competitor is, I'm assuming it's beef jerky at this point when I think about any beef jerky. If I compare you to, like, let's see, I got Chomps here next to us. It's a different story, right? Chomps feels very like, to the point, where meat sticks, we're this, we're that. But like, this feels like you're joining I'm not saying I don't keep warning you. You're joining a tribe. It's
the carnivore cult.
Yeah, carnivore cult, right? Like, I love meat, and I'm going to join the people who love meat. So Paul asked a great question. Where's your favorite place to find a good old space ads to study?
There's a lot more now than there used to be. One is swiped.co, I think is the website. I think it's swipe.co. They have a ton, and you could filter by like product categories. Another thing to do is, like, if you have specific, like if you like Ford Motor Company, like you could just look at like Ford Motor Company vintage ads. Actually, Pinterest has a decent amount too. A lot of times my Google searches will land me on Pinterest. So Pinterest has a good collection. I like to start with like brands that I know and that I like, and just look through like the history. And there's thousands. These big brands have done so many ads, but there's some Twitter accounts who, of course, I'm forgetting their names off the top of my head, but sometimes there's Twitter accounts that'll they'll do threads with like old school ads. I think there's one guy like the Ad Professor. I think that's his name. I don't remember his handle, but he does some posts. As a copywriter, like I've just always collected these things. I'm just blogs and reading books and things. But I would recommend the Howard Gossage ads too. If you guys haven't looked into Howard Gossage, he's got some books that are really good that have some really exceptional, like he helped save, they were going to flood the Grand Canyon. Some company wanted to flood it, like build a dam and flood it. And he wrote an ad that just absolutely like lit people up and stopped the project. And it had all these politicians behind it and all this big money. And he's like, yeah, screw that. We're not doing that. He wrote an ad and just like shut the thing down. Like the dude was insane. So Howard Gossage is a good jumping off point, I think.
That's great. Anyone else have any questions here? No, this was great, Chris. I think, I think that, people having different perspectives is really important in my mind of learning. I think there's a lot of ways that people are going and defying around the basics or the general best practices. And this is a very clear case of that. Harry asked a fun question here. How would you add this type of fun messaging to a jewelry company?
Yeah. For jewelry, some of the advice that I gave before about the fashion applies, but there's also like, why do people buy jewelry? Like, what's the feeling behind the piece? Like, what does the piece represent?
I want to be pretty. I want to be luxurious. I want to look worldly, whatever that is, right? It's about appearing and feeling better about yourself. Yeah.
And even also like, if it's like a deep ocean blue and you write a piece about like, there's some really great like short form writers. Like there's this guy I follow. He's a style guy. His name is OW Root. He's on Twitter, Necktie Salvage, and he'll come out with these like little quips, and he'll just like describe a feeling. It'll be like walking along the lake at sunset and feeling like the cool breeze, ruffle my shirt. Like it's just like random like little quips that help put. And I'm like, that would be a good SMS. Like that's a feeling. That's something you could feel, right? Or like. I remember like we went to down the Jersey Shore for vacation last summer. And like, there was this one moment when like we were at the boardwalk and I heard the carnival music and the kids laughing in the background. Like, how do you describe feelings? Each piece has a feeling. Each piece has a story. How do you verbalize the things that you feel and you see and you hear when you're out? Like, the environments that you're in, like how, like it's just, again, part of this is looking through what's come before in old space ads, and part of it is also like, what do you want people to feel when they're reading the message, right? I know that's a bit like vague. It's hard for me to just do this.
Yeah, it's hard without actually seeing the brand. I get it.
I got a pen and paper, and you give me a little bit of time, I could knock some out, but it's hard to do, on the fly sometimes.
I think it's, again, like you could bring up characters, you can make characters, you can have a mascot. Like it doesn't mean just because you're a high AOV or a jewelry company that you can't have a fun brand or voice or even a spokesperson. Maybe it is elegant and maybe it's overly elegant because I'm so badass or highly egotistical, right? You got to come up with it. And I think what Chris is saying is like, you got to define that voice before you go after. I mean, it's the same thing Thomas was asking here. He says, we work with brands, high AOV, doesn't do much content to link out and linking back to the PDPs. That's problem number one. You probably should have landing pages. But secondly, as he goes, he's talking about condensing SMS because we require more education. Well, it's not about providing more education. It's about providing enough teas, in my opinion, to drive them to the page. Now, it sounds like you might have a conversion problem on the fact that you're driving to a PDP, or maybe the PDP needs to upgrade or a landing page needs to be built. But, ultimately, it's not an angle. It's just a tone and a voice and the way you want to go after them. And you just have to find that hook that gets the people interested. Like, again, I don't know any context of your product or what they do at a $1,500 AOV, but I'm going to assume that, let's just say, I know a guy who runs hair restoration, right? Kevin, for example, at Iris Store. He's got and I'm thinking about him, and you could make fun of being the bald guy or not being the bald guy anymore, be the best hire in the room. Like, there's so many things that you can come after. And just because you have high AOV doesn't mean anything different. It's still humans, it's still people on the other end. There's no change in who these humans are. They just have a little bit more money, or there's a little bit more intent in what it takes to buy your product, whatever it might be. But your goal is to get them hooked and keep them tied in before they make that purchase, right? So, yeah.
I mean, I don't think the AOV is as important as, again, like I'll just say we don't have context of the product, but like, I used to be the CMO of Perennial Pastures Ranch, and they're a regenerative cattle ranch. And we would have a $6,000, whole cow share. It's like 500 pounds of meat, and like you put it in the freezer, right? And you have meat for the year. And we would sell with all different types of copy and like this style of stuff, right? So like, I'm not saying that the AOV isn't important. It's just that there's always a way through. It just depends on what are your people watching? What are they seeing? What are they hearing about the industry? What are they hearing about the products? What are the problems they're experiencing? What are the solutions they want? What are their dreams?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what are their pain points? What are their frustrations? Like, there's so many different ways to generate. And screw it, use like ChatGPT. I do that sometimes. Like when I'm doing research, I'm like, why are people frustrated with X, Y, Z? And then, are there any other reasons? And they generate 20 reasons. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. These are some pain points. Boom, done. Right. So I would start there.
No, that's fantastic. Well, we're coming up to the top here. It's 2:20, so we've got probably a couple more. So we'll do one more question here, and then we'll let everyone go. How'd you do? Oh, here's a good one. And I don't know how to pronounce your name. Nimra. I don't know. Oh, sorry, I butchered it probably 1,000 times. How would you be directing the attention of funways of a bookkeeper or financial service? That's totally different, but I think it's the same thing, man. It's like It's like dehumanize the boring. Oh, dude, it's actually easy, right? Bookkeeping, financial, like let's go. Math nerds, accounting, annoying, or like whatever you may be in your position. If you're working with entrepreneurs, we think about this as like the things that we hate to do. So I'd be making fun of that actually, and I would be leaning on that as my way of injecting comedy into a pretty boring industry overall.
Yeah, you could do that. And there's always something going on in the market too, right? Like a good example, like
fear. Yeah.
Like what was it, a month, maybe 2 months ago, Mark Cuban sold the Mavs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he sold it for, I want to say 3.2 billion, give or take. I think he paid like $218 million in taxes. So it's like Mark Cuban just sold his business and paid 12% tax rate, like pretty crazy. I wonder if he used these loopholes, ... right? Linked to like a content piece or an opt-in or something like there's, or, you know what I mean? Or like, sounds like he used this loophole, like, let's discuss, right? Like, there's always like, that's not something that happened to you or to the person, but it's something in the cultural zeitgeist that you can comment on. With taxes too, it's like you have April 15th, you have quarterly estimates, you have end of year, you have annual reports. I just filed mine 2 hours ago, right? Like there's so many events that come up like that you could always go back to. There's a ton of ways. There's a ton of common enemies. You can throw rock IRS, politicians.
Just the biggest one of them all, the IRS.
Yeah, right. Like that'll give you a year's worth of text messages, right? So there's always a way to bring, but you got to think of, it's like, what are my customers thinking about, right? Like within the carnivore snack stuff, like I know what they're thinking. I'm in their brains. I'm like a worm. I crawl through their ear. I'm in their brain. I can see everything going on.
We can tell, man. You're bought into the cult too. So the meat cult is what we're calling this. So
yeah. So like, but when you live in their brain, it's not hard to write stuff, right?
Sure.
So oftentimes I think it's like, and what I tell people is like, go become your customer. And like when I wrote for Filippo Loretti, which we did, this is back in 2016, we did the 18th biggest Kickstarter of all time back then. So there's been a few more that have been bigger. So they bumped them down the list, but we did just shy of 5.2 million USD in 30 days. And I'm not a watch guy. I don't wear watches, right? So I said, well, I got to write for this project. It's got to be big, right? So I said, I'm going to go out and actually go watch shopping. So I went to a few stores and talked with salespeople, and I saw the questions they were asking. And I didn't know shit. So they were like, do you want this kind of strap or this kind of strap? I was like, well, what's the difference? Right. And I was just asking questions and getting sold to, and I actually wound up buying a watch for my wife. I actually pulled out my credit card, swiped. So that way I could get the experience of the buyer. And I didn't just try to enter the conversation in their mind. I walked a mile in their shoes. So I really understood what makes them tick. And once a terrible watch pun, but once you understand what it's like to be the buyer, then you understand what to write. Yep. So that's the advice I give to people.
No, that's fantastic, man. Well, looks like we're at the top, and I want to make sure that we're respectful. I know all the people who have stuck on here towards the end. Thank you guys all. Thank you, Chris, for being here, dude. Thank you. I know that there's a lot of people who are going to watch this recording as well. We know where to find you. It's ORZY.co is where you should go find Chris. You can also find him on Twitter. If you just look at my recent post, you can find him, where you can just go type his name in Chris ORZ, and usually I think you're the only ORZ at that point. So you should be good that way too. But Chris, thank you for your time, your effort, your energy that you put behind it. I can tell that The audience loved it. They're thanking us here today. It was great to see a lot of you guys here. I'm sure this recording will live on for a while, and we'll continue to go educate the world here. So thank you guys all in the audience for listening, and thank you for the team for setting this thing up. Chris, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. To everyone else, have a great rest of your day as well. And we'll be back again next month with another training from Sendlane and the team around how do we continue to further and educate your business. Thank you guys all. Have a good one.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.